Hello and welcome everybody. Thank you very, very much for joining to this webinar of the Asia-Europe People's Forum. Raquel, Castillo and I welcome you on behalf of the Food Sovereignty and Resource Justice Cluster of the Asia-Europe People's Forum, short AEPF. My name is Felix Anderl. I'm a professor of conflict studies at the Center for Conflict Studies in Marburg, Germany. And I represent the foundation ASEAN House in the International Organizing Committee of AEPF. The AEPF is a network of social movements and progressive NGOs across Asia and Europe. And it was formed in 1996 at the eve of the first ASEM, Asia-Europe Meeting Summit in Bangkok. At the time, key social movements and NGOs were concerned that the dominant development approach, corporate power and unaccountable elites and multilateral institutions would lead to increasing inequality, injustices and poverty in Asia, Europe and worldwide. We in the Asia-Europe People's Forum wanted that an alternative paradigm that puts people at the center of development, a people-centered approach to regional integration and just multipolar world without hegemons can be heard and must be heard in the ASEM meetings. Since then, we have been following this agenda, bringing people-centered actions and analysis to the forefront. And today is a good example of this. We will talk about the war in Ukraine and the implications for food security globally, but specifically in Europe and Asia. And I'm really looking forward to hear the compilation of amazing speakers that we have assembled today. And I think it's a good additional perspective that we haven't heard a lot. Since Putin's invasion in the Ukraine, there was of course, a lot of talk about how civil society can be in solidarity with the affected people in the Ukraine, and it's very, very difficult. And we will hear a little bit about that. But there has also been a lot of talk about this magic word supply chains that is very much on vogue currently. But it is often lacking a people-centered perspective. And I think that is what we will add today. Specifically from a perspective from Ukraine, but also internationally, and then with a focus on the effects of the war on people living far away in South Asia and Southeast Asia. So I think this will be a very interesting discussion. We will hear several perspectives, and then we will open up for a discussion on what this means for progressive policies in both Asia and Europe, how we can support our friends in Ukraine, but also how we can think this more broadly as a problem of food security policies at the global level. With that, I don't want to talk too much because we have 5 excellent speakers today who will give us a broader picture, and this will be moderated by my friend Raquel.
Thank you, Felix. And good evening, everyone. Good morning, or whatever the time zone you are in now. Thank you for joining us, and later on for maybe watching the recording of this webinar. It's a very important webinar. As Felix said, there's been massive impacts, both on countries in Europe, but also countries in Asia. And we have a whole lineup of speakers who are very much experts in what we are going to discuss today. The first one will be Anna Danyliak. I hope I pronounced your name right, Anna. She is Agriculture Greening Coordinator at the Center for Environmental Initiatives, or Ecoaction. Ecoaction is a civil society organization that unites efforts of experts and activists in a joint struggle to protect the environment, advocating for energy efficiency, renewable energy, countering climate change, clean air for all, and sustainable development of transport and agriculture. And why is it important to have Anna here in this conversation? Because Ecoaction is based in Ukraine. So firsthand telling us of the situation right there in that country. So Anna, I give you the first slot, the first floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I will start sharing my screen. Just a second. Yes, here it is. Yes, I'm very pleased to be here and being able to talk and share my experience from my organization, Ecoaction. And actually, there was supposed to be my other colleague who works closely with land issues, supposed to present at this event, but he has joined the armed forces since for the last several weeks. So I'm also very much honored to substitute him here. So that's like another dramatic change in like our organization life and people around us. As it was told, Ecoaction is an environmental organization, and one of the issues that we work with is sustainability and environment connected to the agricultural development in Ukraine. And since the full-scale Russian invasion of our country, we also started to talk a lot and deal with the food security and food sovereignty issues, looking for sustainable solutions. Something happened with my screen. Pardon, I will just start it again. Apologies.
Yeah, just try it once more. I think now it works.
So yeah, those like the picture that probably many of you have shown, like the pictures of the direct impact on our lands, like starting from exactly from the February and what is like going on through summer and now when it's harvesting season. So lots of disruption of the food supply chain on a national level and internationally as well, as Ukraine is one of them big agriculture players. Oh my God, something is happening. my slides are going with, without my control. So anyway, like some numbers, they're like, of course, update. I don't know what is happening, but yes, that are happening. Most of them, they are still need to be updated or up to the summer of this year. So lots of much less of the arable land was sown this year, and around like 1/3 to like some calculations estimate like from 1/4 to 1/3 of the arable land or farming land is not accessible for the farming, and also those are the lands that are being either under occupation or under heavy war zones, and that's actually the impact that will stay with us for a very long period, for the decades to come. At least for the demining, it's estimated that it will take around 7 years to demine the lands under heavy war military action. And the direct, anyway, probably I will just stop sharing because something very strange happening with my slides. They're just moving uncontrollably without my will or control. So anyway, Yeah, so there are direct losses that are estimated as of summer of this year, direct losses of around $4 billion for the agriculture sectors, and indirect losses for over than $20 billion. And for the recovery of the sector, again, estimation are for the dozens of billions of US dollars, and of course, as longer the war will go on, the higher the cost of the recovery will be. And when you talk about this food security, global food security, of course, the distracted logistics played the major role, and blockade of the seaport that was like going on for the months. Luckily for the last months, I think since September, there was some agreements were reached, and still a lot of cases when on the occupied territories, when the harvest was stolen, or the grains from the previous year was stolen and used elsewhere, is also like pretty much famous all around the world. And I will try to maybe to go back to my slides. Hopefully it will work slightly better. Okay. So this is like another estimation of the that's a screenshot from initiative Victory Gardens, another initiative that works with the food security on the national level in Ukraine. That's where the estimation how much less of the harvest of the different agricultural production we will get this year. So you can see that like the numbers are huge, like somewhere for that's mostly considering the grains and vegetables. So for most of the vegetables, there will be like from 1/3 to the half of the harvest of the previous year. So the initiative was or is working with to substitute those things in the territory that are under control of the Ukrainian government and can substitute the losses at least partially from those territories under occupation or under military actions. And the indirect cost, and that's what my organization is also working on, is a monitoring of the potential environmental damage from the war, and that's again something strange happening. So we are monitoring via public information or information that are available publicly or from the media resources on the events that were causing harm for the environment, like water resources, soil, natural ecosystems, destruction of the infrastructure that is causing damage to the environment. And that's another example of the indirect cost for the agri-food system of Ukraine that will have an impact for the years to come, if not decades. And I'm talking mostly about the soil, because as I was told before, like around 1/3 of the soil or arable lands were destructed by this war, and especially on the south of Ukraine, where like 90% of all land is agricultural land. So the mines there and the pollution, no one knows what the pollution in if those lands will be even possible to use for the agricultural purposes afterwards. So this is like another thing or investigation and examination that we will need to conduct to make sure that those land, like huge vast territories will be possible to use even for the agriculture in the future. So again, like that's almost like 1/4 or between 1/4 and 1/3 of the Ukrainian land. Yes, and yeah, about the solution, probably I will talk. That's a not solution, but our vision as an organization, what can be done, or the vision for the recovery of agricultural sector. What we observed, or what the full-scale war revealed, is actual fragility of this big-scale industrial agriculture. It had and still has like a huge importance for Ukraine's economy. So before the full-scale invasion, like around 10% or even over 10% of national GDP was related to the agriculture, and like 40% of the 40%, like almost 1/2 of the revenues from the international trade was coming from the agriculture, and mostly it was from the industrial type of the agriculture. However, when the full-scale war started, this industrial agri sector, it became like very convenient target for the aggressor. So we heard like lots of stories with one precise shooting of some warehouse, or I don't know, some storage facilities. The whole chain was disrupted, and yeah, so they only with one precise target you can disrupt the huge supply chain that will have impact on millions and millions of people. And on the contrary, the small-scale producers, they became, or their importance, let's say, became even more visible on the national level. And there were lots of examples, and still are, where the rural communities, they became the shelter for the people who were fleeing their homes. So just to give you a picture, around over 7 million of people in Ukraine were displaced within the country. So mostly people moved to the center and west of Ukraine, and around the same amount of people, they flee the country. So they're for now staying abroad. So around, let's say, 15 million of people moved elsewhere, and that added additional pressure for the local food systems. Yes, so I will probably try to share again the screen, just to give you a glance on the principles for the green recovery of the agriculture. Not only agriculture, but Ukraine in general. Our organization is working on the different sectors, including energy and urban development. So we want not just to build back as it was, but learning from the lessons from like several crises in a row, starting with the pandemic and now with the war. We saw the fragility of the food systems, and so this is several principles that we came up with, and what is
Anna,
yes,
maybe
I'm almost done. But,
almost done. Okay,
yes.
so
So if we talk about the sustainable agri-food systems, we really see the need to prioritize local food system. So self-sufficiency is like really the must. That's what this war taught us for sure, that we can't rely or can't be like or over-dependent on a global supply chain. And of course, the diversification of the small and medium sized agriculture enterprises and their cooperation is one of the way to do that. And sustainable solution for the land management and nutrients management, because that's another thing that we observe in Ukraine and globally about the nutrients. That's another over-dependency on the artificial fertilizers is making the current system of the production very unsustainable and not resilient. And of course, when we talk about Ukraine, that's another issue, is the transparency of the agricultural land market, whether the small producers, though who are supposed to be a backbone or is a backbone of the food system, local food system, have the even or equal access to the land market. And that would be all for now, and I will be gladly answering your question in a while. So finally, my slides are working well, but I have to finish. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for this sharing, Anna. We will go directly to the next speaker. So we've taken note of some of the highlights of what you've said, and I hope that others are preparing their questions and comments. Okay, so we go directly to our next speaker is Nick Jacobs. He is Director of International Panel of Experts on Sustainable Food Systems, or IPES Food, a diverse and independent panel of experts shaping debates on how to transition to sustainable food systems around the world. Nick is a specialist in agri-food, trade and development policy with a background in media, communications, and political research. He was a member of the former support team to the former UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, Olivier de Schutter, from 2011 to 2014. So Nick, give us a global overview of really what's happening in these issues.
Thanks very much, Raquel. I'm going to be sharing my screen, and I do hope these slides will work. Okay, great. You should see the first slide loading. There we are. So as Raquel mentioned, I'm here on behalf of IPES Food, and the remarks I'll be giving are based on a report we published earlier this year, soon after the invasion, looking at the initial impacts on food security. The report was titled Another Perfect Storm, and we've been continuing to monitor the global food security situation since then. So first of all, what is happening globally? Over the year, we've seen a huge interruption of Ukrainian and Russian grain exports, oil seeds, and fertilizer exports as well. We've seen this overlaid with climate impacts that have really affected production over the course of this year. And together, those various factors have had a massive impact on food prices. We saw record grain prices in March 2022 on global markets. They've subsequently come down slightly, but there's no room for complacency here. And by the end of August, global food prices were still 8% higher than the same month in 2021. And that was already kind of record high prices then. The most affected countries by these food price increases are low-income countries, particularly in the Middle East, North Africa, East Africa. Sorry, I think somebody has their microphone on. It's quite difficult to hear. But I will carry on. Hopefully that will get resolved. It's countries that are highly dependent on imports of wheat from and other food commodities from the Black Sea region. And, you know, straight after the invasion, we saw bread prices doubling in countries like Lebanon, Egypt, Sudan. Some of those impacts have softened slightly, but we're still seeing a massive increase in food import bills for developing countries. estimated to be an additional $25 billion in food import costs this year. And a typical food basket in sub-Saharan Africa is now 8.5% more expensive. So that's a really big difference, particularly for low-income populations. Also important to note that, you know, the food price crisis has slightly softened from its peaks in the spring, but it's here to stay, and the impacts could actually get worse. The climate impacts that have also happened this year are likely to strain food access next year. We're seeing fertilizer shortages that will have an impact on next year. And we're also seeing a rising crisis of debt, the highest public debt levels in 60 years in developing countries, which is going to have a huge impact on their ability to deal with this crisis and to protect their population from rising food prices. So, you know, we were invited to reflect on how this crisis has changed the food security situation. And I think it's important to add at this point that this crisis is really a tipping point. It has exposed underlying weaknesses and a global food security situation that was already very problematic and has made it worse. And, you know, in my remarks now, I'll be focusing on those underlying weaknesses that have actually been exposed by this crisis. And in our analysis, we identified 4 structural flaws in particular that have turned the Russian aggression in Ukraine, this regional supply shock, into what is now a full-blown global food security crisis. We were talking about the first structural flaw, food import dependencies. And as I mentioned, the countries most affected by the situation, by the food price rises, are countries that are highly dependent on imports of wheat and other products from the Black Sea region. And actually what we found is that the most vulnerable countries are facing a double dependency. So they're dependent on imports of the staple foods that they eat every day at a high percentage. And they're also dependent on specific countries supplying those foods, really a handful of companies and countries. And in our analysis, we dug down and found, you know, this is really a longer term trend going back to the colonial era, where there's been a gradual erosion of dietary diversity, traditional diets, and an increasing focus on a handful of staple foods. This happened through the Green Revolution, with a focus on a few high-yielding crops. It happened through the structural adjustment period, with countries in Africa, for example, being encouraged to promote cash crops at the expense of producing food for domestic consumption. And this has led to a situation where a number of countries are highly vulnerable when those handful of exporting countries go offline and are unable to supply those foods. The second kind of structural flaw that we identified is the highly entrenched nature of global production systems. So in a situation like this, you would hope that food systems could be agile, that we could shift production to meet food security needs. For example, shifting from biofuels to food production, or from feed to food crops for human consumption. But that hasn't really happened to the extent you would want to see. And that's because global food systems are highly specialized, and those patterns are really locked in. And that's a result of a number of policies and imperatives that really have supported an industrial, highly specialized global food system over many years. So that includes kind of R&D policies that focus on specific crops, agricultural subsidies that support those commodities, and also the development of specific infrastructures and skills to support the production and export of specific crops. So that's the second big structural problem that we see in food systems revealed by the crisis this year. Thirdly, 2022 has shown that we have highly opaque and dysfunctioning global grain markets. And the issue here is that, you know, the war perpetrated by Russia in Ukraine was always going to disrupt global supply to some extent. But the huge price shocks that we've seen are not really justified by the global supply situation. There have been very strong harvests, strong production over recent years. And those food stocks are there. There's not actually a shortage of food globally. There's difficulties accessing it at the higher prices. And this points to some problems in how grain markets function. particularly the lack of transparency on global grain stocks. We have systems to share that information, but they're clearly not functioning well. And we've seen in particular that these global information systems are lacking. So these are big gaps in the system that prevent us getting that transparency on global grains. We've also seen lots of financial speculation happening this year with financial investors cashing in on rising food prices and making the situation much worse. So again, this is a reflection of the problems, underlying problems in grain markets, in global food markets that have been shown by this crisis. The fourth kind of structural flaw that we've identified in food systems, as shown by this crisis, is the vicious cycles of hunger, poverty, climate change, and conflict that have been there for years and have just become more visible this year, really reached a tipping point. So these are, there are dozens of countries around the world that are now trapped in these cycles. We saw 62 developing countries during the pandemic spending more on debt servicing than they did on healthcare. So these are countries that clearly can't adapt to the shocks they're faced with. They're looking at deteriorating macroeconomic situations. They have huge debts to service. Climate change is decimating harvests and creating drain on public financing in those countries. So countries are really trapped in this spiral. They're not able to make the investments they need in social safety nets that would cushion their populations from rising food prices. And they're certainly not able to invest in making their food production more resilient. And that's really what needs to happen longer term to prevent countries being buffeted like they have been by a regional supply shock. So those are four structural flaws that we identified in food systems that have been exposed by this crisis. And what we also noted is that these same problems were already visible in the 2008 food price crisis. Speculation, food import dependencies, and many of the other problems, and they simply haven't been resolved. There hasn't been enough action taken. And already the responses we're seeing to this crisis, unfortunately, are failing in a similar way to address the structural problems. We see the IMF, World Bank, other global institutions focusing on providing more financing, more loans to developing countries, but we don't see enough talk about debt relief. We see a lot of focus on getting grain shipments out of Ukraine, but we don't see enough focus on the longer term and helping countries to transition to resilient, climate resilient food production. More domestic food production to prevent them from being so affected by these crises. Thank you.
The next speaker in our lineup is Farooq. Farooq Tariq is a political leader and activist from Pakistan in South Asia. He is General Secretary of Pakistan Kissan Rabita Committee, PKRC, and member of Haqq Party, or for People's Rights Party. He is also a member of the Asia Facilitation Group and the International Organizing Committee of Asia-Europe People's Forum. Farooq?
Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you well. And
okay.
Here's hoping that nobody will be disrupting you.
Okay. All right, thank you. I am actually opening my video so you can watch me there sitting at Amsterdam airport. I'm on the way to Pakistan. I was here for a meeting and then went to Britain. So sorry for this little mess up, which I have just noticed that some trolls are trying to disrupt the meeting. Anyhow, we have to take more extra measures in future. Now, I'll just speak on the topic now, Ukrainian war impact on the food supplies internationally, particularly on Indian subcontinent. Maybe Sandeep will take up some more afterwards. And now, I can say that Ukrainian war alongside with the disaster, floods and rain in Pakistan has made the issue of food a very, very urgent issue. And there are all the estimations that there will be a severe food crisis in Pakistan, particularly the crops which were under pressure because of Ukrainian war are now been destroyed completely or partly because of this unprecedented wave of floods and rain in Pakistan. Now, almost 1/5 of Pakistan was underwater, and over 80% of crops in the affected districts have been destroyed already. It's maize, it's cotton, it's sugarcane, it's most of the vegetables, it's apple gardens, it's grape gardens. So all the different aspects of agriculture life, particularly in Balochistan and in Sindh province of Pakistan. Pakistan has 4 provinces, and these are the 2 largest provinces as well. And the 7 days consistent war rains, and also the flood, which had never seen before in the history of Pakistan, has made these crops totally destroyed. And also, we have seen that dairy products have been destroyed, and also this fish farms, they are gone because the water was so high that all the fish farms which was established in Sindh and Balochistan, small and big one, they have all lost. So, I mean, coupled with the Ukrainian war, which has already put Pakistan's wheat crisis in process. The prices of wheat has gone up. It was nearly 3,000 rupees to now it's gone over 5,000 rupees for 40 kg. And there is a severe shortage. Pakistan, which was hub of producing wheat at one time, where 37% of the total economy is based on agriculture. That's where now we have to import the food items, particularly the wheat and cotton. And these were the 2 which were Pakistan was exporting these. But after Ukrainian war, India put a stop of exporting anything from outside. So they stopped their export of agriculture product. So did Pakistan, and Pakistan has to order wheat. And they have been talking to Russia, they have been talking to Ukraine, and there has been no successful negotiations. And Pakistan is really sort of fighting in between US imperialism and Russianism. So he doesn't know where to go and how to behave with this. And so Imran Khan, at the beginning of the Ukrainian war, had gone to Russia to meet Putin and express support. And later said, no, this was already planned visit. It was not a visit. And he said, while coming out of the airplane, he said, what an interesting time I have come to Russia. So war was an interesting time for him. And this was former Prime Minister of Pakistan. And so is the attitude of the present rulers, who either go to America, but now Joe Biden, in his latest comment, said Pakistan is one of the most dangerous places in the world. And that might so because of the atomic weapons Pakistan carries, and Pakistan is under threat of religious fanatics who have been taking over places inside Pakistan. And this is like the a place where we have seen the repetition of the period when NATO took over Afghanistan after 2002, and most of the fanatics spread to Pakistan. But now, after taking over of Taliban in Afghanistan, the next target is Pakistan, and that's where Biden is targeting. Although the Pakistani ruling class they don't want to sever their relationship and cut their relationship with the fanatics. So coupled with the challenges of emerging religious fundamentalism, we have this food crisis, and it's a severe food crisis. At present, you see the prices of onion, tomatoes, garlic, ginger, is all going up and up. Ordinary vegetables, which was like 25, 30 rupees a kilo, now is selling over 200 rupees a kilo. So it's very difficult even to go for vegetation as a food in Pakistan because of this crisis which has emerged after the flood and the rains. So Ukrainian war has put Pakistan in a position where it's very difficult to really improve its agriculture. They have to import wheat, they have to import cotton, and they have to import most of the fruits. And this has put Pakistan that agriculture product is the largest section of the budget, national budget at present time, where most of the oil is imported. So now the vegetables and the other daily food item has to be imported. Coupled with this, the new liberal agenda of IMF, which has given only $1.7 billion loan to Pakistan, has asked to increase the prices of electricity. So I was part of this major demonstration in Islamabad, where peasants and farmers came from all over Pakistan. They took over Islamabad for 8 days. I was one of the last speakers there, and we demanded the government to take back the increase in the electricity prices. But that means that they have to raise the prices of oil, they have to raise the prices of gas, and that ultimately raise the prices of the electricity. So electricity, if there's no electricity, so farmers will be worst hit. And I have heard farmers at the demonstration in Islamabad that we have never seen so much electricity bill as we have received this month. So it's a multi-dimensional crisis of agriculture in Pakistan. New liberal agenda, floods and rains, and Ukrainian war, they have come together, and they have been new liberal agenda has been put by force by the government. But people are fighting back. Government had to promise the farmers that they will reduce the prices. So we are not giving in. We will organize the peasantry, landless peasantry, the rural poor, for food rights, for food sovereignty, for land rights, and for the for the things to grow. And last week we had organized a woman demonstration in a district where women came in the forefront, and they demanded hereditary rights in the land, and also land and the relationship of women in producing the food was discussed. And it was very clear that this is where Pakistan can survive if women are empowered to in the fields, and they can do a lot. So thank you very much. That's what I have to say, Raquel.
Thank you so much, Comrade Farooq. Very dire situation in South Asia, in particular in Pakistan. As you can see, all of these different factors coming in together, all converging at the same time, with the climate change and the floods in Pakistan. And then at the same time, we have these disruptions in the food supply, with also the prices going up because of the conflicts. We have a situation here where let me see. I'm hoping that Felix can come in, and also Sandeep, especially Sandeep, because he's supposed to be also in the lineup of speakers. Unfortunately, they were kicked out of the room. And we're trying our best still to, it's now having a difficulty making them come in. Okay, so I will ask the next speaker then. But before we do that, can we do this? Because for all of the people here now, I would like to see if there's still somebody here who's doing all this, disruptions, no? May we request everyone, since we are
I will take care now. I will
Oh,
take care, and I will take care now that it's not disrupted. I am reclaimed my hostness. So Raquel, go ahead, and I will take care of the trolls.
No, Farooq. The problem is we also need Sandeep to come in and also Felix to
Yes.
come in. But
So let them come in now. Let me
yeah, but
see.
they are having problem coming in
Okay, let me check.
because apparently the room has been locked. And
I see.
well, Hussein is here still. So please try because
Yes, I will
you
try.
were the
I will
one.
try.
Okay. And may we request before we go on, may we request who are the people who are here now to open your cameras so that we can see everyone who's here. Thank you, Nick. Please, is it possible to see proof of life, to see your cameras, to see you on camera so that we know that you're actually the one really there using that name, because that was the problem earlier.
Felix
Gosh,
and,
this is so...
Felix and Sandeep are in the meeting.
His name, what were you saying? Is it possible for others to please open your camera? Bianca, please open your camera. Lacey, right? Chris, Betty, Anu, Katie, Anjaneyu, Lu, and Sandeep. Saima also, and Joseph Matay. Thank you, Snain. There's a Lacey and there's a Katie raising their hands. So can you please open your camera? Is Lacey?
Okay, Raquel, go ahead.
Okay. We shall go ahead. Farooq, bye. Please take care of that.
I'm
trolls.
taking care. I'm taking care. You go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So was his name successful in bringing in Sandeep into the room? Sandeep, are you there? Not yet.
No, Sandeep is inside.
Yeah,
Yes.
I see his name.
Yes.
Farooq sir, please make Sandeep the co-host so he can speak.
Oh.
Who? Okay. All right. Okay. Okay.
Okay. Sandeep, can we hear you? I will
I
now
can't
be
see him now.
introducing you. Huh?
I can't see him now here.
No, so never mind that. I will go to our last speaker in the lineup. And this would be Bianca Martinez, is Program Officer at Focus on the Global South and is based in the Philippines in Southeast Asia. Her main interests include understanding and analyzing the intersectional impacts of neoliberal policies on different sectors and peoples, as well as documenting and learning from the alternative practices and systems organized by grassroots communities. Focus on the Global South is an activist think tank based in Asia, providing analysis, building solidarities, and supporting alternatives for just social, economic, and political change. So, Bianca, I give you the floor. 7 minutes. Hello, Bianca. You are muted. Should we make her also a co-host? Please, his name. If that's the technical glitch, please make Bianca also a co-host so that she can speak.
Yeah. Bianca, Danyliak. Is it Bianca? Okay.
Bianca Martinez.
I was
Yes.
able to speak without being a co-host, so I don't know if that's the problem.
Oh,
Okay, Bianca is now co-host. Please ask her to speak.
okay. Bianca, are you there? Can you, I've
Hello,
already
hello.
introduced you. That's
Yeah,
great. I've
sorry,
already
sorry.
introduced you.
Mhm.
Okay, so please open your camera and you can now give your input.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I was having a problem a while ago because I can't turn on the mic. It says I'm not allowed to do it because there were limitations in the activity. But yeah, so I'll just share my screen. Just a moment. Sorry. So okay, so my presentation will mainly focus on the situation of the food crisis, particularly in Southeast Asia and also some parts of South Asia. So just gonna share my. Can you see it? Is it visible?
Yeah, you
Yep.
can. We can see you now. Go ahead.
Okay. 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 Um, so yeah, my presentation will slightly touch on the some of the impacts of the Russia-Ukraine war on the food crisis in Southeast Asia, but I'll also mostly delve into like the structural roots of the food crisis, just like what Nick did a while ago, but this time looking particularly at these two sub-regions. So wait, okay. So it's quite clear, no, from the statistics and indicators, and more importantly from the accounts of small-scale food providers that the world is indeed facing a massive food crisis. So here are the latest numbers from the FAO. They said that since the beginning of the pandemic, 150 million people have been added to the ranks of the hungry, and the total is now 828 million, and around 425 million of that are from Asia. And then the food price index has also reached an all-time high in March 2022 at 159.7. And these are some of the accounts from the ground. So those who are heavily impacted by the overlapping crisis of the pandemic, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and also the pre-existing structural problems with the industrial food chain have overlapped to create massive loss of jobs and livelihoods, income and wage loss, increased debts and cost cutting for basic necessities to make up for the loss of income. And then we also see that in many cases, the aid provided by governments were not enough, and they were often used as patronage. And also, state support has mostly benefited the corporate sector and left out small-scale food providers. So, in particular, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, although many of the countries in Southeast Asia have, few direct economic links to either Russia or Ukraine, the conflict is causing various commodity prices, especially oil, nickel, wheat, and corn to surge. And this is particularly concerning for Thailand and Vietnam and Singapore because they are net importers of these commodities. And also producer and consumer price inflation in Thailand, for example, has increased to 11.44% and 5.73% year over year in March. And this was up from 8.7% and 3.23% respectively in January. So although the effect has not yet been evident in overall consumer price, as their inflation is still around 2.2 to 2.6%, the impact of rising oil costs is prices such as transport, housing, electricity, gas, and other fuels. And in fact, in Indonesia, there was a widespread protest because of how the Widodo government removed their protection for regulating oil prices. And then in Vietnam, the petrol shortage is leaving some stations without any petrol to sell. And it's alleged that enterprises are hoarding petrol as they wait for price escalations. So, of course, this would also have impacts on commodity prices. So, with regard to that, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Vietnam will most probably suffer more than the others as their per capita consumption of staple foods like wheat is relatively high as compared to the others. So, although so we've seen from that kind of brief overview how much the Russian invasion of Ukraine has really impacted food security and food prices in Southeast Asia. But the orthodox account of the food crisis is that mostly coming from governments and multilateral institutions, is that the present food crisis that we're experiencing now can be entirely attributed to the pandemic and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But although we know that these two developments did serve as very important aggravating factors for global hunger and food insecurity, they're not the sole drivers, but basically they serve to inflate the crisis that has been existing even before the pandemic, and that's mainly because of the structural problems within the global food system itself and the global value chains. And yeah, basically the problem really lies in the industrial food system itself. And these are some of the main problems. So for the first one is the globalization and liberalization of agriculture. And we already know how this was initially introduced through structural adjustment programs and later on institutionalized through the Agreement on Agriculture under the WTO. And these dynamics in global food and agriculture trade have resulted in the displacement of territorially embedded food systems in Southeast Asia. And therefore, millions within the region were forced to depend on global food supply chains. But despite the pandemic, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the extreme climate events and various other disruptive crises showing how unsustainable global food supply chains are, world leaders continue their pursuit of free trade agreements that seek to reinforce the very problematic global value chains. And one concrete example of this is the pursuit of the RCEP, or the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which is an agreement between ASEAN countries and 5 other countries that they identify as major economic partners. The RCEP is more comprehensive compared to other agreements that Southeast Asian countries have gotten into, in that it involves liberalization of trade and of various goods and services, but also of foreign investments. It also involves massive deregulation and reinforcement of patents held by corporations for many products, including seeds, medicines, and vaccines. So, but so I will this next section this based on a report from the Boston University looking at the market access implications of RCEP. And it finds that ASEAN basically has a lot to lose in this agreement. And most of the gains will actually be enjoyed by non-ASEAN states. So for the first one, the balance of trade, we see here how ASEAN is expected to lose around or the balance of trade is expected to deteriorate by around 6%, or which is equivalent to 8.5 billion US dollars, whereas so all of the countries in red text are the ones that are expected to see their BOT deteriorate. So almost all of these are from ASEAN, and there are just a few gainers, and which are either some of them are very marginal as well. But we see that Japan will see the highest increase in BOT. And then also all RCEP countries will experience an increase in their imports, and particularly the ASEAN will see it increase by 7.8 billion. And then this one compares the change in imports going into ASEAN member states coming from other RCEP member states, and it finds that imports of almost all ASEAN countries increase from China, as we see here, except for Laos and also for Vietnam. But while almost all ASEAN countries will see rising imports from China, China's own imports will increase mainly from Japan and Korea. So that means that China will experience, trade diversion post RCEP from ASEAN countries to favor Japan and South Korea. And then in terms of exports, ASEAN will also be a net loser, as we lose most of our export shares to other our 752 million US dollars as compared to the non-ASEAN states, which will see an increase of around 26 billion US dollars. And then finally, all ASEAN countries are projected to incur tariff revenue losses as well. So overall, ASEAN will lose 3.8 billion US dollars in tariff revenue. So this is especially problematic in the current context, considering that additional government revenues are much needed for economic recovery programs, public services, social protection measures, and wage increases in the face of rising inflation and external debts because of the overlapping impacts of the pandemic and the conflict in Ukraine. And then, so the intensification of liberalization and points to the ever deepening commodification of the agriculture sector. And this is deeply connected with widespread land grabbing. So here, an interesting case is Cambodia, because it's known to be one of the hotspots in land grabbing in Southeast Asia. So as of December last year, the government has been documented to have granted 302 land leases, which encompass 2.2 million hectares of land, which is equivalent to 12% of the country's total land area. And this is largely attributed to the country's 2001 land law, which allows the government to lease land to investors and corporations for up to 99 years. So yeah. And then another structural problem that has been worsening the food crisis is debt-driven growth and recovery. So especially over the past 2 years, we've seen how lending institutions have aggressively been pushing for more debt as the solution to the multiple crises that we're facing. So So much so that by the end of 2020, borrowings of low and middle income countries in East Asia and the Pacific and Southeast Asia have risen to 1.23 trillion. And this means that more public funds are being diverted away from public services and social protection towards debt servicing. So in 2020, the World Bank estimated that debt service payments to IFIs and private lenders has risen to 115 billion US dollars. But despite the widely recognized implications of the debt problem, the IMF and the World Bank are planning to peddle more loans to crisis-ridden countries with limited options, as the APMDB had said. And then at the same time, illegitimate debts also continue to be contracted under highly irregular and very opaque procedures to finance projects that lead to widespread human rights violations, erosion of local livelihoods, and displacement of communities, massive destruction of ecological systems and biodiversity, and exacerbation of the climate crisis. So these are just some of the many projects underway that have been funded with illegitimate debts. And then also, as mentioned by our other speakers a while ago, the climate crisis is another major problem that is displacing territorially embedded food systems, and the agri-food system is a major contributor to that. So it contributes around 31% of greenhouse gases, according to the latest estimates by the FAO. And the ETC group estimates that the industrial food chain, in particular, contributes 90% of the total emissions from agriculture. So already the catastrophic impacts of the climate change are being felt in many parts of South and Southeast Asia. So extreme weather conditions such as droughts are increasing pest infestation, whereas cyclones and heavy rains are bringing severe flooding, and also increasing runoff and soil erosion and reducing soil fertility. So these are expected to lead to massive damage of crops, which would alter agricultural productivity and reduce farmers' incomes and undermine their capacity to provide food, which will then lead to higher levels of food insecurity. And then on top of the destructive impacts of the multiple crises that were mentioned earlier, women in particular are being further marginalized and exploited as a result of gender inequalities, across the industrial food system. So women's agricultural labor is often considered to be extensions of their household tasks and are not officially documented as work. Although, despite the fact that they actually, in many communities, they do both productive and reproductive work. And then women are, especially in poor communities and households, women are increasingly pressured by their socioeconomic and cultural conditions to take on productive work on top of reproductive work. And so many of them tend to be overworked. But despite the crucial contributions of women in agriculture, the patriarchal traditions normalize the casualization and underpayment or non-payment of their work, which largely benefits big capital, and this is seen in the case of India. Okay. And then also, apart from being underpaid or unpaid, another consequence of the non-recognition of women as farmers or agricultural laborers is that they are burdened with an additional structural barrier to accessing land and the resources tied to it. So you see here in the case of the Philippines, for example, how the stark difference in the number of men and women with agricultural land titles. So without legal titles, women are more vulnerable to land grabbing, displacement, and exploitation, and they usually have no claim to compensation when their land is taken. So these overlapping political, economic, and social crises faced by women make them more vulnerable to food insecurity. So this is data from the FAO on the moderately or severely food insecure as of 2021, and of all women, 32% are moderately or severely food insecure. And It's also estimated that 446 million women and girls will be living in extreme poverty by 2022. And then many countries in Asia also continue to be reported as the worst places for land, environmental, and human rights defenders. So according to, sorry, I forgot to change this, but it's supposed to be from Global Witness. This is data from Global Witness, which says that 228 land and environmental defenders were killed worldwide in 2020, and 40 of those are from South and Southeast Asia. Leaders have been enforcing draconian laws on the pretext of inflated emergencies concerning national security. But most of the time, these laws are in fact used to indiscriminately repress, harass, and detain and surveil all critics, human rights defenders who are maliciously labeled as communists, terrorists, etc. And in many cases, those who are considered enemies of the state are disappeared, they're tortured and killed with impunity. And such cases have become more widespread in rural areas where conflicts over resources have become more prevalent. And we're expecting that the dire situation of human rights and social justice in Southeast Asia will remain, if not worsen, because world leaders, as we've seen, are hell-bent on maintaining the neoliberal order, even in the face of massive popular resistance. And then another structural root of the food crisis is the corporate takeover of the global food governance, which has worsened the commodification of food and agriculture. This is facilitated by the consolidation of multi-stakeholderism as a governance model in the food and agriculture sector, which is steadily supplanting multilateralism. And it throws out the line of the direct lines of accountability that are at the core of multilateralism. And a mapping initiative done by the People's Working Group on Multi-Stakeholderism shows of 27 multi-stakeholder initiatives in the food and agriculture sector, shows that most of them are dominated by transnational corporations, while marginalized sectors and communities are grossly underrepresented in these spaces. And these dynamics are alarming because the outcomes of these processes would take effect as policies, despite the fact that the actors that dominate them have no direct accountability to the people that will be affected by their decisions. And one such example is the the Food System Summit, which has been notorious within civil society for being organized under the name of the UN, but has in fact been dominated by agribusinesses. And one of the main agendas that they've been pushing is the digitalization of agriculture, these technologies, which are controlled by big corporations, could potentially violate the data privacy rights of farmers and also displace agricultural workers. And the ETC group warns that the push for digitalization of agriculture could rapidly erase traditional knowledge about food production and thereby eliminate food sovereignty altogether and the independence and agency of small-scale food providers. I think maybe we could. So I'm not going to go into detail on this because I mean the opportunities for solidarity and ways forward, because I think we have a Q&A and maybe I could elaborate there.
Yes, excellent. Thank you so much, Bianca. Unfortunately, we lost Sandeep. We have seen, as we knew before, we do have some enemies, and I think one important thing for us to consider is to keep a cool head, and I think we kind of managed to, but sorry for all these distractions, it's really terrible. Since we're already advanced in time and we needed to restrict the functions for Q&A, I think the best way to go forward is just to give the speakers another opportunity to stress what is from their view the priority for the next months and maybe years. What are the most important lessons and ways to go ahead? maybe to restrict to 1 or 2 minutes, but really take the opportunity once more to stress what, from your point of view, are the most important takeaways, and what you would want to stress as a way forward for both us, civil society, but also for governance. So maybe we'll go in the order of the speakers again, and if you want to make a comment to one of the other speakers as well, that is fine. Just don't extend the time for too much. Thank you again very much for sticking with us. And Anna, if you want to start, thanks again very much for joining us. I know it's a difficult situation for you right now, and we really appreciate you being here. So thanks again, and maybe if you want to stress 1 or 2 more final points. Thanks.
Yes, thank you for having me and the opportunity to speak. Despite all, it's an interesting experience, I think, for the first time. So something to prepare myself for my own events. But yeah. I was thinking after like each other speaking, when they were like sharing their like their implications in their countries, that like one of the things that I forgot to mention, that despite Ukraine being even now under war, like having agriculture is like one of the superpowers. But yeah, I would say so. Still, the prices also rose like really high. So on average, on average in the country it's like plus over 20%, and on the south and closer to frontline, the prices for food went like up to 60% more. So even though we are like a great agriculture country, that we are not supposed to suffer from the from the lack of food or the prices for food. I mean, that's the reality for ourselves now. And as I was trying to mention during my presentation, that one of the solutions or the priorities like self-sufficiency and the localized agri-food systems, like on the level of community, because it was like very strange situation, because many people, they with the start of the full-scale Russian war against Ukraine, many people moved to the villages, to the rural areas. But the first weeks or even months, it was like strange enough that being in a village close to the lands, to the farms, there were like limited access actually to the food. And that's also my experience. That you know, like being directly connected with the farm, and you are still like so this dependency on the large scale industrial agriculture, and this super long supply chain made us like very vulnerable in this time of the worst crisis imaginable. So yes, again, the self-sufficiency, or call it food sovereignty, is like really the answer, or the priority that should be given in every country, like to and other things like to mention again the land management issues. I know every country has their own situation, and this like what we are facing is a lack of estimates of the like land issues, and climate change impacts, lack of verified data, how it impacts already and how it will impact in the future is often missing. And that's one of the things that we need also prioritize to know where we are and where we are going, like to have this develop the monitoring system to collect this kind of information as a baseline to for the future plans and strategy. Without it, it's like would be like super difficult to evaluate. Yeah, I'll probably finish here. But yeah, should you have any more questions, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you so much, Anna. We do hope that our cooperation will continue, and please be assured our solidarity from APF. Thanks very much for joining, and we will now hear a statement from Nick Jacobs. Sorry again for the interruptions during your initial talk. You very much kept a cool head. I was impressed. So maybe now this is your chance to have another 1 or 2 minutes to stress your main takeaways and considerations. Thanks also very much for joining us.
Thanks, Felix. And I hope people will be able to read our report, and I can also make my slides available because I did have to skip a lot of the information. I've really enjoyed hearing from the other speakers as well. Thanks so much. And it's a shame not to be able to take questions. Just to maybe summarize my key takeaway message in terms of kind of global food security. The key point really is that this crisis it's a tipping point. It's not the start of the global food security crisis. The situation has been worsening for several years. As Bianca mentioned as well, there are many reasons linked to the policies we have, the way our global food systems are structured, that creates systematic weaknesses and vulnerabilities to food insecurity. So this crisis has really exacerbated that problem. And in terms of what we need to do next, any solution we put in place needs to be building the resilience and building the readiness for the next shocks, because there are going to be more shocks. People remain very close to the poverty line, if not in poverty. And if we don't build resilient food systems and resilient societies with social safety nets, then the next crisis, the next food price spikes will send millions more people into poverty and hunger. So that transformation of the food system can't wait. That has to happen right now. And we dearly hope that the war in Ukraine will end as soon as possible. That's one thing that needs to happen, but there are so many more things that need to happen to build food security for all.
Thank you very much. Yes, that is very much the takeaway, I think. And Bianca, if you're still with us, this would be your chance to formulate your ways ahead and main points you want to stress.
Okay. Thanks again to everyone, to all the organizers and the speakers that shared all their inputs in this very important discussion. So I think the main takeaway for me is that while the cumulative impacts of the multiple crises have brought the food crisis to greater heights, they have also revealed more clearly the unsustainability and irrationality of the industrial food system. And this provides a momentum for civil society, for social movements and grassroots communities to highlight the importance of food sovereignty as an alternative, as our friends have already said. And in fact, during the height of the disruptions of global food supply chains, different communities were able to take it upon themselves to help one another in the spirit of solidarity. And one of the things that really bound people together was food. People were going back to agroecological or reinvigorating agroecological practices and seed banking. They were setting up their own local markets to realize food self-sufficiency. Some worked with civil society organizations to facilitate, the delivery of the goods of small-scale farmers to low-income urban consumers. There were a lot of community gardens, many of which were led by women, that were established to address the food needs of local communities. So these initiatives, compared with the unraveling of the food supply chains, of the global food supply chains, have highlighted the importance of really pushing for an alternative framework. But beyond the local purview, efforts to engage international platforms and movements is also very essential towards building support networks that would further amplify food sovereignty as an alternative. And the international movement for food sovereignty really plays a very pivotal role in synergizing the initiatives and campaigns down at the local, national, and international level to advance different articulations of food sovereignty. So, there are many things to be done to, provide support for social movements, amplify, critical perspectives on the mainstream development agenda, coordinating grassroots-led campaigns that fight against systems which undermine food self-sufficiency and food sovereignty, and popularizing these alternatives at a time when the legitimacy of and relevance of mainstream development is being put into question. And also, it's important to facilitate spaces for exchanges across different sectors, countries, and regions to exchange knowledge on both the practices of food provision grounded on food sovereignty, as well as campaign strategies in terms of advancing the right to food, land, water, and other resources. So yeah, these are just some of the, I think, key roles that local, national, and international movements for food sovereignty and other alternatives could work on in these times. So yeah, thank you.
Raquel, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right.
Okay, we have you have already asked three to give their final messages. It's already 1.5 hours more that we are here. I don't know. Farooq, is Farooq here? We've heard from Europe. We've heard from Nick for closing messages on ways forward from the global perspective. We've heard from Bianca, especially sharing the perspectives from Southeast Asia and a little bit also of South Asia, because focus also covers South Asia. If Farooq is still here, maybe we can hear last 2 or 3 sentences from you, Farooq.
No,
but
no.
not. No,
Okay,
he's not here anymore.
This is
Okay.
you moderating us away.
Okay. Okay. So so we've heard how things that happen in Europe are having an impact on other regions happening in Asia, in South Asia and Southeast Asia. But then our speakers also very clearly put forward that it has only exacerbated things. The situation is actually that there are already structural and systemic issues there in our agriculture and food systems, and and because of this, as they've said, as they've kept on saying, as Nick has said, it's actually for us, for all of us, it's come to a sort of a tipping point. And from this, we've heard our colleagues also on what are the ways forward, what are the things that we need to do together. So for us, very clearly, things like social solidarity economy using agroecological principles and frameworks, and clearly combating the dominance of industrial agriculture and unsustainable and irrational systems that we have across our countries that cause so much misery and cause so much that's causing so much poverty and inequalities. These are the things that we need to join hands together, use these platforms, help us expand more the linkages between Asia and Europe in these kinds of solidarity actions. Just this sharing and just understanding what is happening across our regions is already a very big step towards coming together and agreeing on concrete next steps. So, Felix, anything more?
I would just like to thank everybody who sticked with us despite the trolls. I think I want to start a study on why trolls are so obsessed with penises. But this is the side note. Thank you, everybody. I think we will try and manage to cut the relevant parts and upload them on YouTube without the crap. And I do hope that all of you are successful in your different initiatives. And again, Anna, solidarity. We hope that the war ends soon.